A sitting head of state is about to walk into a United States federal courtroom to answer charges that carry a life sentence. That's the stake at the center of this story. According to reporting on the case, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro is due to appear in U.S. federal court to face narco-terrorism and drug trafficking charges filed by the Justice Department. Before we go further, everything you're about to hear describes allegations. Maduro has not been convicted of anything, and under American law, he's presumed innocent unless a jury says otherwise. Here's where this is going. We'll walk through what the Justice Department says it can prove, how a criminal case against a foreign head of state even makes it into an American courtroom, what a narco-terrorism charge legally means, and what happens next, from indictment to trial, without guessing at facts nobody has confirmed. Start with what's actually on paper. The Justice Department's case against Maduro traces back to charges first unsealed in the Southern District of New York, alleging that Maduro, along with a group of current and former Venezuelan military and government officials, took part in a conspiracy to import massive quantities of cocaine into the United States. Prosecutors allege the group used the country's territory and its military and law enforcement apparatus as protection for a drug trafficking pipeline, and that the operation was deliberately used, in the government's words, as a weapon against the United States, flooding American communities with narcotics. Federal prosecutors describe an alleged partnership between Venezuelan officials and Colombian guerrilla groups, framing the drug proceeds as a way of funding and entrenching political power. Those are the government's allegations, as filed. They aren't proven facts, and it'll be up to prosecutors to prove every element of them, beyond a reasonable doubt, if this case ever reaches a jury. I went through how the Justice Department has described this case in its own public filings and statements, and one detail kept nagging me. The charges weren't framed as ordinary drug trafficking counts. They were framed as narco-terrorism. That word choice matters, and we'll get to why in a minute. First, some context that's easy to miss in the noise. Charging a sitting foreign president isn't like charging anyone else. The United States doesn't have a mechanism to walk into another country and arrest its head of state. So when the Justice Department announces charges like this, what it's actually doing is filing an indictment, a formal accusation, and then relying on other levers to try to get the person into custody. That can mean a State Department reward for information leading to an arrest, diplomatic pressure, sanctions, or, if the person ever leaves the protection of their home country, an arrest by U.S. or allied law enforcement. None of those levers guarantee anything. An indictment is only the first move in a process that can take years or may never fully play out at all. That explains something a lot of viewers ask about cases like this. Why announce charges at all if there's no guarantee of an arrest? Justice Department officials who have discussed similar cases publicly say an indictment does real things even without an arrest. It creates a permanent legal record. It restricts the accused person's ability to travel, bank, and do business internationally, since most countries with extradition treaties with the U.S. are now on notice. And it puts a clock on the case. Evidence gets preserved, witnesses get identified, and prosecutors keep building, waiting for the moment custody becomes possible. So what changed? According to the reporting behind this case, Maduro is now due to appear in U.S. federal court, a moment that, if it happens, would be an extraordinary jump from indicted in absentia to physically inside the American justice system. We want to be precise here. The underlying reporting is what places him on a path toward a courtroom appearance. We're not going to invent the how, the when, or the surrounding details beyond what's been reported, because that's exactly the kind of specific we can't verify, and getting it wrong would matter. Here's the part that doesn't make sense on the surface. A president, however contested his hold on power might be domestically, is still, as a matter of international law, generally recognized as having certain protections tied to his office. So how does a narco-terrorism indictment even get past that? The Justice Department's answer, in cases like this, is that criminal conduct isn't shielded by a title. Prosecutors allege the conduct here predates and exists independently of any official acts, that this was, in their telling, a criminal drug operation that used government power as cover, not an act of state. Whether that argument holds is exactly the kind of question a courtroom, not a press release, is built to answer. The case wasn't built overnight either. Court filings in cases like this typically describe years of accumulated evidence, informant testimony, financial records, intercepted communications, and cooperation from other defendants who took plea deals in exchange for testimony against higher-level targets. Prosecutors build up from the bottom, flipping smaller players until they have enough corroborated testimony to charge the people at the top. It's slow, it's unglamorous, and it's the actual mechanism behind most cases like this one, not some cinematic sting. The case was resolved as an indictment, but resolving it on paper turned out to be the easy part. The harder question was whether it would ever be resolved in a courtroom. Let's talk about what narco-terrorism actually means as a legal term, because it gets thrown around loosely. Under U.S. law, narco-terrorism charges apply when prosecutors allege that someone knowingly took part in drug trafficking intending to provide anything of value to a terrorist organization, or intending to engage in or support terrorism through the trafficking itself. It's a serious federal charge, carrying a minimum of 20 years and up to life in prison upon conviction. Pair that with drug trafficking conspiracy counts, and the legal exposure in a case like this is enormous, which is part of why it draws so much attention. This is general legal context about how the charge functions. It's separate from, and doesn't itself prove, any specific claim about this defendant. What's most surprising about this case isn't the size of the alleged operation. Large trafficking networks aren't rare in these cases. It's the target. Indicting a sitting head of state on these charges is exceptionally unusual. Most narco-terrorism and cartel-linked indictments name cartel leaders, financiers, and corrupt officials below the top of a government, not the person occupying the presidency itself. Here's something that will probably draw pushback either way. Prosecuting a sitting foreign head of state through the ordinary criminal justice system is a genuinely uncomfortable tool, even when the underlying allegations are serious. There are serious, good-faith critics of this approach. Not just people defending Maduro, who say criminal charges against a foreign leader can blur the line between law enforcement and foreign policy, turning a courtroom into an extension of geopolitical pressure. Others say that if the allegations are true, no title should place someone beyond the reach of the law. We're not going to pretend that tension isn't real. Reasonable people land on different sides of it, and this case is going to keep testing where that line sits. That tension became a practical obstacle almost immediately. Diplomatic relations between the U.S. and Venezuela have been openly hostile for years, with the two governments disputing which government is even legitimate. That dispute complicates negotiations, it complicates any potential handover of custody, and it complicates how allied nations respond if Maduro ever travels. According to public reporting, U.S. officials have had to navigate that recognition dispute as part of any strategy to bring him into custody, a diplomatic obstacle stacked directly on top of a legal one. We'll ask you directly here, because we're genuinely curious what you think. When the defendant is a head of state and the case is this politically loaded, is the American courtroom the right venue to sort this out, or does the politics around it make a fair trial nearly impossible either way? Tell us honestly. We read the comments on cases like this. Now to the part that matters most for what happens next. What does it actually look like if Maduro appears in federal court? First comes an initial appearance and arraignment, where the charges are read and a plea is entered, expected to be not guilty, as is standard. From there, the case moves into pretrial proceedings. Motions from defense counsel, challenging jurisdiction, evidence, and potentially even the legality of how custody was obtained. Given the profile of this case, expect those pretrial fights to be extensive and to take months, possibly longer, before anything resembling a trial date is set. If it does reach trial, the government carries the full burden of proof on every count to a unanimous jury. Prosecutors describing cases like this often use language that sounds like it's written for effect, but isn't. It's standard Justice Department phrasing for major conspiracy cases, that the defendant treated an entire country's institutions as an instrument of the alleged scheme. Whether the evidence actually supports that description, for this defendant, is precisely what a trial exists to test. Here's what this tells us about the moment we're in, beyond this one case. Cases like this sit at the intersection of criminal law and international politics in a way ordinary federal prosecutions never do. A conviction here wouldn't just be a legal outcome. It would be read around the world as a statement about how far the United States is willing to go to prosecute foreign leaders it accuses of criminal conduct. An acquittal or a case that stalls before trial would be read just as loudly in the other direction. That's why this is worth understanding carefully instead of skimming the headline. Put yourself for a second in the position of the prosecutors assigned to this case. You're not just building a narcotics conspiracy case. You're building one where every procedural decision gets scrutinized by foreign governments, human rights observers, and international media, where the defendant's legal team will almost certainly argue the entire prosecution is politically motivated, and where a single sourcing mistake doesn't just weaken a case, it becomes an international incident. That's the pressure sitting underneath every filing in this docket. If Maduro's legal team follows the pattern seen in other high-profile foreign defendant cases, expect an early fight over jurisdiction and over the legality of however custody was obtained, arguments that, even if unsuccessful, can stall a case for a long stretch of time. That's a real obstacle prosecutors have almost certainly planned around, because it shows up in nearly every case this size. The indictment stage is closed. What comes next is the part almost nobody outside the courtroom gets to see clearly. The months of pretrial motions where cases like this are actually won or lost long before a jury is ever seated. Let's be honest about where the genuine uncertainty is, because a factual video owes you that as much as it owes you the confirmed facts. It's not publicly confirmed exactly how or when a court appearance would take place, what precise custody arrangement would make that possible, or how Venezuela's government would respond. Anyone telling you they know those specifics with certainty right now is guessing, not reporting. What is confirmed is the underlying legal architecture. The charges exist, they are narco-terrorism and drug trafficking conspiracy counts, they were filed in U.S. federal court, and the reported next step is a court appearance. Something about the gap between indicted and convicted doesn't get enough attention in coverage like this, even now, years into how these cases usually unfold. An indictment is prosecutors saying what they believe they can prove. It's not proof. That distinction isn't a technicality. It's the entire foundation of the American legal system, and it applies here exactly as it would to anyone else named in a federal indictment. So where does this leave things right now? The charges stand. The case is active in federal court. Reporting places Maduro on a path toward a court appearance to answer them. And under the law that applies to every defendant in that courtroom, regardless of the office they once held, he's presumed innocent unless prosecutors prove otherwise to a jury beyond a reasonable doubt. We cut a few of the deeper procedural weeds from this video to keep it watchable. The specific statutory citations, the full list of co-defendants named when the charges were first unsealed, the exact reward history tied to information on his whereabouts. If you want us to go deeper into any of that in a follow-up, tell us in the comments and we'll put it together. For now, this is a story still being written in real time, inside an actual federal courtroom docket, not in speculation. We'll be tracking the filings as they're made public, and when there's a confirmed next step, we'll bring you exactly what the record shows. Nothing more, nothing invented. If you want to understand how a case like this actually plays out, stick around, because we cover exactly this kind of federal case every week.